Thank you, everybody, for joining us here in another session of the Choice Chats. My name is Loren, and as you know, I like to keep it simple and brief. And these Choice Chats are created as a love letter to all of you who have made a pivotal choice, a bold choice in your life that led you here and led you to contribute to a better tomorrow. And so today I am honored, humbled, and everything in between to have David Livermore, who is not only a friend, but a mentor, a teacher, and all things people, and a great human being, one of the best human beings I've ever met in the planet. And so, David, welcome.
Thank you, Lauren. What a delight to be with you.
Thank you so much. Before I get started, I do want the listeners to understand a little bit about you. So can you give a little blurb about what your history is and what your focus on is?
Yeah, quick background. My wife and I of 30 years have two daughters, 24 and 26. We all live in Southern California, though I've only been here a couple of years. And my wife and I have only been here a couple of years. Professionally, my work for about the last 20 years has been devoted to this work that both you and I talk a lot about, cultural intelligence, which started initially as just a curiosity in how culture affects the way people learn and engage and reflect. And then fast forward to, over the last decade or so, really doing work devoted on how you help individuals and organizations become more culturally intelligent. So you and I have had a chance to interact in this space. I had the enormous privilege of getting to read an early draft of your book, and you were also one of our inaugural C.Q. fellows. So we have so many intersecting interests, priorities, and really grateful for the important work that you're doing, Lauren.
Thank you, David. That means so much to me. I was telling you before we started recording that I'm a bit nervous because it is like interviewing my teacher, my father, and someone that I really admire and respect. So I appreciate that. One of the things that I like to focus on is what great journey you've had, and at some point you had to make a pivotal choice, that bold choice that really helped you pivot with purpose. And I want to talk a little bit about what that choice was in your life and what led to that choice for you.
Such a good question. And I've been thinking, because you just prepped me before we started, that this was one of your favorite questions to ask as part of this. I'm like, which one do I talk about? Because there's those pivotal ones of getting married
Yes.
and, going away to school and purchasing homes, some of the financial ones. But I think for the overlapping interests we have, and really, even if someone were just to ask me on the street, one of the most bold choices I think I made was the decision to leave my day job at the university and start the Cultural Intelligence Center, which there's multiple facets to that. And I choose that one because, first of all, there was a bold choice to be made financially. I mean, I was working at a private institution. We were not paid, enormous amounts of money, but it was a paycheck. I still had two kids at home. There were benefits and all that. And so it's like, I never really thought about being an entrepreneur. I was not a business guy. I was an academic who studied sociology, and you and I share a faith background. I spent a lot of time in nonprofit, but starting a business. So it was bold from a financial standpoint. Quick anecdote with that. Between my wife and me, I'm more of the risk taker in life, and she's always sort of that, but what if and what about? But with this one, she was the one that's like, I don't know why you're hesitating. This is what you're supposed to do. It couldn't be clearer. And that emboldened me in such a strong way. Like, wait. If she's saying this, and this maybe goes beyond just the entrepreneurial risk to the bold choice. Her reason for that was, Linda's not overly oriented around money and business, and that she's a musician and she fits all the stereotypes of being a musician. But for her, it was like, I don't think you can really be true to yourself and your calling if you continue to play it safe and live within the institution where you're teaching. I think you need to spread your wings and get this word about cultural intelligence out to the world. So That's the bold choice that comes to mind. And to say the cliche that the rest is history. I mean, but especially in those early years was such a fun ride, scary, but thankfully there was such wide receptivity to the idea of cultural intelligence as meeting a need for people engaged in international work, for people engaged in diversity work, as well as culture transformation. And really, it's what's allowed me to meet amazing people like you along the way. So that's the bold choice that comes to mind for me. Leaving the day job, which I know you've also
Yes.
done, and spreading wings to jump into entrepreneurship, but it was never really about business. It was always about a larger calling and a sense of I can't not do this.
That's so beautiful. Well, we should all be thanking Linda for propelling you to jump, right? Because we wouldn't be here without it. And you're impacting so many people across the globe that it was not only a wise choice, but such an impactful one for all of us in different ways. We talk about that a lot. And as you've seen the Cultural Intelligence Center grow, I know recently you created the CQ Fellows program. What has that what has that achievement done to propel you towards greater heights in this journey you're in?
Mm.
Because you mentioned it's a lot about mission and impact, less so about the business side of entrepreneurship. So I want to tap into that impact for a second and give you a moment to answer.
Yeah, thank you. I would say it's been a lot about scalability, but not as much again in the business sense, though obviously that's included as well. In the early days of the Cultural Intelligence Center, I would say a lot of the work was very personality driven. And so, my books were coming out, I was speaking on stages, people were inviting me to come in. And then it's kind of like, well, first of all, a white straight guy from the US should not necessarily be the sole personality that's driving CQ, but more importantly, genuinely believing like there are aspects of this work that are better understood and better applied by people who have lots of other lived experiences than I do. And so initially, part of that was at the Cultural Intelligence Center, we built in the CQ certification programs that I know you've gone through, where people got certified to use the instrument. And that was really birthed out of this idea of, hey, people in lots of different walks of life are better at helping people understand the assessment than just I am or our small staff. But then fast forward to this CQ Fellows program that you were part of the inaugural cohort of. That to me was really a new iteration of me thinking about it's got to be less about you, Dave. Like there are lots of other gifted, talented people. And to be really transparent about it, I mean, I guess the blessing and curse of our success at the Cultural Intelligence Center was as we were growing more broadly, I mean, my ability to spend extensive time with any small group of people was getting pretty limited. We were managing a growing staff and, blowing all over around the world in keynotes. It's like, wait, but if the impact is what matters most, is it to go really broad or is it actually to go deep with a few? And so for me, part of it is season of life, mid 50s guy in that, and just going, okay, this next chapter, I'm not ready to call it my last professional chapter, but this next chapter, I really want to go deep. And this isn't any kind of messianic, like I need to pass the baton. It's like, no, I genuinely believe, and I said this in the foreword to your book,
Yes.
I genuinely believe that the CQ work needs people who do have direct lived experience with being part of marginalized groups, which I do not, and this is where you bring both to it, have the expertise in understanding the science and the research behind cultural intelligence. So yeah, for me, that bold choice started as sort of not quite solopreneur, like I had a business partner and we had a small scale back staff, but now today almost going back to, all right, but how do I really invest deeply in a few people so we can actually together support a movement that's much bigger than any one of
You said the
us?
perfect word, a movement, because that's what it feels like. It's funny. Each one of us
Mm,
has a particular role we play in this movement. No two people are doing the same exact thing. And I think that that's what beautiful about this movement is that we may have similarities, but we bring such a breadth of diversity to CQ that we may be doing similar things, but we're doing it completely different.
Yeah, I love that. And I saw that you and Jennifer Ezekor were just together on, was it
Her
her podcast or
podcast,
yours? I can't
yes,
even keep
yes.
her podcast. And it's like both of you are women of color, to use language we would use in the US. Both of you provide training in cultural intelligence, but the lived experiences and the ways that you go about applying it are so different. And it brings me so much joy because I think, to your point, the movement is like we cheer each other on. And yes, you have unique business objectives, I'm sure that you have for Cultura, as does Jennifer for Above Difference. And I'm just using the two you as one microcosm of a much broader thing. So thank you for saying that. I agree with that. Of course, there are some individuals, present company excluded, who are driven a lot by competition. And it feels like this movement is more oriented on cheering each other on and knowing that there are some unique things that each of us bring to bear, but that we really believe will build a more culturally intelligent world if we're all doing that work somehow together as a movement.
Absolutely. And a movement it is. And more people are becoming more connected with this word, because I like to say it's the nerdy Siamese twin of emotional intelligence. That's a whole separate podcast. But
Hey, how come we're the nerdy
because
ones?
it's not as trending, for lack of a better word,
Okay,
it's not,
okay.
it's like the Microsoft versus Apple.
We're the nerdy kid that then we're the nerdy kid though, but then when you get to the 20th reunion, you're like, whoa, they had to glow up.
Exactly. I was not expecting
So it's
that.
coming. It's
Exactly.
coming.
It's coming. And this is why I use that analogy all the time, because emotional intelligence is the trending one. It's the one that's been around for so long. But CQ, man, that's the powerhouse. That's the posh geek, or the thriving nerd that is going to emerge, right, and take center stage, because we've seen the power that it can have in relationships. And I want to
Mm.
bring it back to you because one of the things that I so admire about you is that you are incredibly humble. Yet you are all over the place. You're always traveling. You have all these different projects. And I want to share with everyone and share here what you do to stay human. You are incredibly generous with your time. And the one thing that we all say every time we talk, and by we, I mean those that have had the opportunity to work with you, is that you have this incredible ability to help each one of us feel seen and heard in the
Mm.
midst of your busyness. And that is not only a gift that you have, but it is a gift to be able to experience that. And so for a lot of leaders out there, it's becoming more and more difficult to lead in the midst of chaos, in the midst of madness. And so I'd like for you to share what you do to stay true to that, what you do to stay human.
Mm. That's so generous of you. I'm not sure I'm deserving of it, but I will say, even your intro to the choice chat of me, like it made my heart soar that what came to mind was that, and he's a wonderful human. Like, may that be the way I'm described more than, and he's written this book or he was on this stage. I think it's, having a close circle of people who are willing to let me know where I'm not all that great and call me to account, but know that they're my number one, cheerleaders and have my back in mind. You and I have talked about this a lot, but I'm a obsessive journaler, and that's, the space where I'm writing something that nobody else will ever see, and just being really raw about how I totally screwed things up yesterday and how I want to do better today. So that's a piece of it. Also, like you, I'm a runner, so that's part of like my connecting to making sure I've created space for myself. I don't like running with other people, but in part it's because that's my headspace. And the last thing I would say, and I know that you and I share some similar background here too, is I am a person of faith. And while my faith, like yours, I think, without stealing your own story, has evolved a lot, through my travels, through my studies, through my relationships with people. But it's still a piece of what keeps me in check, of to not be too full of myself, and to not think that I'm ultimately the end of this whole thing. So I bring a very transcendent spiritual orientation to my own inner life, as well as to the reason that I want to do this work. So those are a few thoughts off the top of my head of, well, at least how I aspire to retain a human, humble approach to this work.
That's so beautiful. And yes, it does resonate with me a lot, because we talk about this, as you said. And you do need a certain structure. You do need, everyone's practice is different, but you certainly need to have something to fall back on to help you stay grounded and stay connected. We talk a lot about that in emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, and how it's important to have that check-in with yourself and with others. And so, as we come to a close, what is one thing you'd like to leave our listeners with?
This sounds perhaps so superficial, but there's all kinds of research behind it. And I would say, find someone who's very different than you. Maybe that's opinion wise, political wise, color of skin, race, nationality, but somehow very different than you, and connect with them. There is all kinds of proven research that part of how we retain our humanity is to see the humanity in someone who's very different than us. And maybe best of all, it is someone who believes passionately other than you about Trump or Biden. Let's pick the really volatile issues. I just saw it. I'm apologizing that I won't be able to give the name of it, because I just saw a quick clip of it before we jumped on, but someone sharing a TED Talk where an individual who is queer mentioned just the hate that they get all the time on X or other platforms. And it just caught me so off guard, because they said one of the things they do is they'll actually click on the profiles of the people giving hate, and they stop and think, this is a human being. What's behind their story that they're doing that? And I'm not saying to people who are on the receiving end of hate that they need to do that, but there is something about, for all of us, following, as you would know, all parts contact hypothesis that says when you have people who are different, who are actually connecting, that's actually one of the best ways to develop cultural intelligence, even though it was not called that way back when that work was originally done.
That's right. And we can geek over this all day, every day, I'm sure. But I appreciate you taking time to spend here with us today. And as always, I am eternally grateful to you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Loren, and equal gratitude for the way that you're taking this work into, the volunteer work you do with young women, into the tech sector that you do professionally, and to this brilliant choice framework that you're using that's really bringing CQ into a much more tangible ways that organizations can use it.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the ways that you're taking cultural intelligence into the next cool chapter.
Thank you. And that's a wrap.